everyone. Welcome back to the At Home Author YouTube channel, and I'm super excited to have a special guest with us today. Paige, I will let you introduce yourself.
I'm Paige Terlip. I'm an agent at the Andrea Brown Literary Agency. I am based in Denver, Colorado, and I rep everything from picture books all the way up through adults. So I get a nice variety in my day-to-day life. Um, yeah, and I'm really excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. So, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into the industry in the first place?
Absolutely. I had a bit of a circuitous path to agenting, which I think is pretty common. I had my own business for a while. I did like content creation for behavioral health practitioners. I worked at the National Renewable Energy Labs. I got to bowl in the White House, which was super fun. I then decided to go and like flee cube life, and I worked at a ranch in the Rockies. And then decided that books were kind of calling to me, and I didn't really know how to get into the book arena, so I decided to go to grad school and learn more. And I went to Simmons and I got an MFA and an MA in children's literature and writing for children. And it was through my grad school experience that I started doing internship and assistantships with publishers and agencies. And I really loved the flexibility of being an agent and just the variety of the day-to-day life. And I get to live in Colorado and work remotely, which is really fun. And so that's kind of how I ended up at Andrea Brown. I started assisting executive agent Laura Rennert, and then had the pleasure of, moving into the agent sphere after about 3 years with her.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, as an agent, what are the qualities that you see in a children's manuscript that are like, oh, I have to have that? What are the standout things?
Yeah. It's so hard because there's, I think, so many pieces of the puzzle that go together to create this very strong picture. So I feel like all the elements are really important, but what I find that I'm drawn to the most is voice and character. I really appreciate a novel that has a character that feels familiar and yet unique. Someone that I can relate to, but also is like opening doors and giving a glimpse onto other life experiences that I have yet to experience, or that I will never experience. And then I think on for picture books too, like on a line level, the voice is so important. How are you engaging both the kids, but also the parents who are, potentially reading this book aloud? And so I think that voice, especially in picture books, but I think novels too as well, like it can really make a project stand out.
Well, and just to sneak a tip in there, one thing that I see quite often is a lot of new authors not reading recent publications and trying to write in a voice and a style that is much older, and that can be a barrier to breaking into the industry now. And so, one really easy thing to do is take your idea and go to Barnes and Noble, go to your library, and just look at new releases and read them. Sometimes there's tons of YouTube read alouds. There's all kinds of places to find newly published books and keep up on those. And I think that that is a great way to get a sense of what is selling today and what readers want today.
Absolutely. I feel like the picture book market has changed so much in the past 15, 10, even 5 years. I mean, I think it's so quickly evolving that having a grasp on what's being published today is pretty essential to being published.
So, what are some of the other common mistakes that you see when something pops up in your inbox?
I mean, aside from the very obvious mistakes of like, I don't represent that, which I think is just, do your research. I see a lot of people that will maybe miss out on the emotional arcs or the emotional stakes in a project. I know a picture book is slightly different in that it's such a shorter format. So you're not going to necessarily have, these big evolved emotional arcs, or like these super intense global stakes that you might get in a a YA novel. But I think it's still very important to, if you're writing a narrative, if you're writing like a concept book, obviously that's a very different conversation. But if you're writing like a fiction picture book, I really look for a narrative arc, an emotional arc. How is the character changing from the beginning of the story to the end of the story? And the text might show that, but sometimes that it's not being presented in an enticing way in the query. And so I think kind of working that into the query while still being brief, because especially for picture books, you don't want the query to be more words than your picture book submission. So it's a balance of, making sure you're hitting the key selling points, but then also not overwhelming the agent who's then going to have to read, the full text in the submission. I also think another thing that I see is comping to titles that are very old. I see a lot of Dr. Seuss comps, or Very Hungry Caterpillar, or like some of these like seminal works of children's literature, which are great. And maybe if there is a older classic that you feel like your book is tied to, you could potentially mention it, but make sure you're also mentioning these more current things. Like you could say it has the timeless appeal of X with the blah 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 of Y, which could be a more contemporary comp.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say too that if you're going to use any comp, even an older one, make sure it's an actual fit.
Yes.
Because sometimes I'll see people use Dr. Seuss purely because it rhymes, but Dr. Seuss has a very specific meter and structure and style. Is your style like that? Because if not, you're kind of giving the wrong impression of your
Yeah,
book.
and if you're comping to something that is like such a big book, and your book maybe is a more quiet lyrical book, like the market for those books are very different. And so sort of understanding who your reader is, I think, is a large part of the comping process. And so, you may not want to comp like a big commercial laugh out loud book to something that's quieter just because they both rhyme.
Right, absolutely. So, what would your advice be for an aspiring children's book author to make their manuscript stand out?
Yeah, I think having a critique group is going to be huge. Having other people take a look and give notes. Obviously, you want to have a critique group that you feel safe with, that you trust their judgment. And I think it's also important to use your own discretion of what the comments are coming in. You might get a mixture of things that are one person saying this is working really well, one person saying it's not working well. So you'll have to use your own discretion about what is true to your vision in the story. But having other eyes on it is invaluable, and not just your kids, not just your spouse. Like pick people who are in the writing community who can give constructive criticism. And then especially for picture books, reading it out loud is going to be a huge tool. So you can like even if your book's not rhyming, I think you catch so much of the flow of the line level language, because when I'm reviewing a picture book submission, I am a bit more critical about that line level flow than I might be in something like a novel, because it's shorter and it's like more of a polish situation. I think too, having multiple projects that are in querying shape is helpful. So if an agent is saying, I like your work, what other ideas do you have? Sharing other picture book projects that are in good shape is very useful, because especially for picture books, sometimes it can be a bit of a numbers game. The first one might not sell. And as an agent, I want to work with you, hopefully, for a very fruitful career. So I like to know that you have other ideas and you have other things, ready to go or in the pipeline in progress.
Absolutely. No, I like to tell people that feedback is your friend.
Yes.
It's your friend. That's where the real magic happens. So let's go back to query letters. When you have something pop up in your query manager, I don't know if you do inbox or query manager,
Query
and
manager.
yeah, you see their query letter. Picture books are obviously a little bit different. So what makes a query letter stand out, or not?
Yeah, I think especially for picture books, it's the content. I if I I'm very selective on the picture book clients that I take on. And so for me, it really has to be a premise that I am hooked into. It needs to be something that is really enticing and feels unique and sellable. Like that's just and that's a hard thing to know because it is so subjective. So that might not be the most useful answer to that question, but it is something I look for above all else is really, am I hooked by this premise?
Well, I think that goes back to research too, because, agents, I mean, most agents at least, try to be as visible as possible and put things on manuscript wish list about their favorite reads. I wish I had acquired this type of book. I just read this and it was awesome and I loved it. And so looking at that can give you a sense of what their taste is, what their style is, what their preference is. And that can hopefully help you figure out what will hook them, or if there's a potential connection there, keyword hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there any trends you're currently seeing in children's literature?
I definitely think for picture books, we're seeing a lot of humor. People want to laugh, they want funny, they want maybe a big character to carry a property, like a new grumpy monkey or a new little blue truck, something that's going to be big and commercial. I've been hearing that as a request from editors a lot. And I think the nonfiction biography market has sort of it surged, and now we're seeing that sort of be lower. So it seems like humor is really taking the day. I mean, I know the people are still buying the beautiful I love you books, the lyrical introspective books, but it does seem like they got a bit saturated. And I think as potentially a response to the trials of our world, people want to laugh. And so I think that's really something that folks are looking for.
Definitely. And I also always remind people that the industry as a whole is based on what readers want and what readers are buying, and that's what trends are based on. And so just because you have something that's like an I love you book, doesn't mean necessarily to shelve it, because it doesn't mean it's not going to happen and you have to go write something funny right now. It just means that could impact what agents are looking for right now, and that could change next week or next month
Right.
or next year.
And
Um,
trends are so hard. I think we see them, but we see them in a lag almost because publishing just takes so long to get a book from conception to publication. And so it's sometimes hard to say, oh, this is the trend, you should write this book, because who knows what it's going to look like in 2 years when that picture book actually pubs. And so I think writing what feels is calling to you, what you want to write, and then hopefully the trends flow around that, but stuff still sells and the markets are always shifting, the pendulum swings back, and it's not to detract people from writing the book of their heart.
I love that. What advice would you give to somebody just starting out? Like at the very, very beginning, what would you tell them?
I think buckle up. I don't mean that in a cruel way, but I just think a lot of people get into publishing because it seems it's a dream, and they don't really realize the hard work and sort of the roller coaster effect of publishing. And so no, like going into it, being creative, being excited is important, but also having this perseverance through the ups and downs. I really value a client that is there. Like we get rejections, but they're still wanting to chug along and keep on keeping on. And I think everyone gets told no in publishing, so it's an unfortunate reality that you have to sort of develop a thick skin. And I think part of that is not just being resilient, but also knowing what you want in your career. So if you really want to be a prolific picture book writer, it's it's going to mean that you just have to be along for the ride, and this is your goal, and you just look towards the goal and you just keep on keeping on. But if your goal is I just want to publish one book and this is the book, then I think that's a different scenario. So knowing what you want, I think, can also help navigate the roller coaster of the industry.
Definitely. Well, that's all the questions I have. So, is there anything else you'd like to add? Any other tidbits you'd like to share? Or
Yeah, I mean, I know I've like such a negative note to end on. I didn't mean it to sound so demoralizing. I think the other thing to know is just that if you do work hard, it will happen. It may take time, and it could be your 20th manuscript and not your first manuscript that finds the perfect agent or the perfect publisher, but it just takes one yes. And finding that one yes that's an enthusiastic yes that will champion you and sees the value in your work is priceless. And so don't settle, know your worth. There's so many creative, beautiful projects out in the world, and there's space for more.
I love that. Yeah, I sometimes feel like the publishing industry is a little bit like dating or or like playing matchmaker, and it takes you a while to find the one. It takes a little bit of time, and some people find it faster than others, and you just do the best that you can, and reach out and find resources. I think it's super important to find other authors who are in a similar spot to you because they're going through the same things. And when you have your down day, they can help get you out of it. And when they have their hard day, you can kick them in the butt too. So
Totally. I think of a community of people that are going to support you and be your cheerleaders or your shoulder to cry on is invaluable in this industry. Your agent is going to support you as much as they can, but there's nothing like writers supporting writers. It's just a different connection and relationship that I think is so valuable.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. In the description below, I will put more details about how you can reach out to Paige and keep an eye on when she opens to queries. But thank you so much. This has been super valuable. And to everyone watching, make sure you like and subscribe so that you don't miss any other helpful tips, tricks, and new videos.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. Good luck, everyone.